the door that should not be opened. The new apartment was perfect, or so Claire thought. After months of searching, she had finally found a place that was within her budget, close to work, and surprisingly spacious. The landlord had been eager to rent it out, offering her a deal that seemed almost too good to be true. The apartment had a modern kitchen, large windows that let in plenty of light, and a cozy bedroom. But there was one odd thing: a door in the living room. It was small and unassuming, painted the same beige as the walls. The landlord had mentioned it in passing. Asterisk, it leads to a maintenance closet. It's locked, nothing to worry about. Asterisk, at first, Claire barely noticed the door. She was busy unpacking, arranging furniture, and settling in. But as the days passed, her attention kept drifting to it. Something about the door unsettled her. It was the wrong size, too narrow and slightly shorter than it should have been. And there was no handle, only a smooth surface with a single, rusted keyhole. On her third night in the apartment, Claire was woken by a sound. A faint, rhythmic tapping. She sat up in bed, her heart pounding, straining to hear. It seemed to be coming from the living room. Grabbing her phone for light, she crept out of her bedroom. The tapping grew louder as she approached the door. She stopped in front of it, her hand hovering just inches from the smooth surface. The tapping stopped. The sudden silence was deafening. Claire's breath hitched, and she backed away, forcing herself to return to bed. It was just the building settling, she told herself. Old apartments made noises, but deep down, she didn't believe it. The next morning, Claire noticed something she hadn't seen before. A faint scratch mark ran along the edge of the door, as if something had been clawing at it. The sight sent a chill down her spine, but she brushed it off. She had to. What else could she do? But the sounds continued. Every night, the tapping returned. It grew louder, more insistent, and soon it wasn't just tapping. There were whispers now, faint but unmistakable, seeping through the cracks in the door. She pressed her ear against it one night, trying to make out the words. All she heard was her name. Claire tried to ignore the door, but it began to invade her life in subtle ways. Objects in the apartment moved when she wasn't looking. Her keys, left on the kitchen counter, would be found on the floor near the door. Her plants, once thriving, began to wither, their leaves curling into brittle husks. And the dreams started. Every night, Claire dreamed of the door. In her dreams, it wasn't locked. It stood open, and beyond it was a darkness so complete, so suffocating, that it felt alive. Something waited in that darkness. Something with eyes that glowed like embers and a voice that whispered promises she couldn't understand. One evening, Claire came home to find a rusted key lying on her coffee table. She froze, her mind racing. She hadn't put it there. The door had no handle. Why would she need a key? She picked it up, the cold metal biting into her palm. Against her better judgment, she approached the door. She had to know. She had to see. Maybe if she opened it, the whispers would stop, and her life could go back to normal. The key slid into the lock with an unnatural ease. It turned with a soft click, and the door creaked open. Behind it was darkness. Not the darkness of an unlit closet or an empty room. This was deeper, heavier, like staring into the void. The air that seeped out was freezing, carrying the faint scent of decay. Claire's phone flashlight flickered as she shone it into the space. The beam was swallowed almost immediately, revealing only a hint of the floorboards that stretched into the black. Then, she saw it. A shape moved in the darkness, slow and deliberate. It was tall, hunched, with limbs too long and a body that seemed to shift as though it wasn't entirely solid. Its eyes opened, burning red like dying coals, and locked onto hers. Before Claire could scream, the door slammed shut with such force that it rattled the walls. The key fell from her hand and clattered to the floor. She tried to leave the apartment the next morning, but the front door wouldn't budge. No matter how hard she pulled or how many times she turned the deadbolt, it refused to open. Panicking, she called the landlord, but her calls wouldn't go through. Even her messages went unanswered. It was as if the apartment had been cut off from the outside world, and the door was no longer locked. Every time she turned away, it crept open just a little further. She could feel the cold air seeping out, hear the faint whispers growing louder. Her name, over and over, spoken by a voice that wasn't human. That night, the tapping returned, more insistent than ever. Claire sat in her bedroom, clutching a kitchen knife, too afraid to move. Then, she heard the door creak open. Footsteps followed, slow and heavy, crossing the living room. They stopped just outside her bedroom door. The handle turned. The last thing Claire saw was the darkness spilling into her room, dragging her into the void. Days later, the landlord entered the apartment, a forced smile on his face as he showed a new tenant around. The strange door in the living room was locked again, the key nowhere to be found. "Don't mind that door," the landlord said casually. "It's just a maintenance closet. Nothing to worry about."